The argument didn't start with words. It started with a look of pure disgust. Samantha stood in the middle of my small workshop, her designer heels clicking impatiently on the hardwood floor I had polished myself. She looked around at the stacks of mahogany and the smell of sawdust. To her, it was just a tomb of unrealized potential. "Mom," she said, her voice sharp, "Julian's family is wealthy. Your house, it smells like poverty." Those words hit me harder than any hammer blow I had ever delivered. I had spent 26 years in this house, raising Samantha alone after Richard died. I worked double shifts and restored furniture late into the night just to pay for her private schools and those very heels. I looked at my hands, stained with walnut oil and scarred by labor, and then at my daughter. She didn't see the sacrifice. She only saw the lack of a chandelier. "If that is how you truly feel, Samantha," I said quietly, "then perhaps you should find a place that suits your new standards." She didn't hesitate. She began dragging her expensive Louis Vuitton suitcases toward the door. "Julian's mother has offered me a suite in their mansion on the Battery," she snapped. "She says winners shouldn't live in the shadows. I'm moving out today. Don't bother calling me, I'll be busy." The heavy oak door slammed, and for the first time in decades, the house was silent. I didn't cry or scream. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out a dusty, iron-bound box that Samantha hadn't even suspected existed. Inside weren't just old photos. There were deeds, stock certificates, and a ledger that Richard had started and I had perfected over 30 years of quiet, disciplined investing. Samantha thought I was a simple carpenter living hand to mouth. She had no idea that I didn't just restore furniture. I acquired the very land those mansions stood on. My husband hadn't left me with nothing. He had left a secret empire of real estate that I had expanded while living a modest life. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. "Arthur? It's Rebecca. I want to buy the Sterling estate." The next morning, I watched from my porch as a black car picked up the last of Samantha's things. She didn't look back at the home that had sheltered her. She thought she was heading toward the winner's circle at Isabel's grand mansion. She didn't know that Isabel's family firm was teetering on bankruptcy. The very roof over their heads was about to be owned by the woman whose house smelled like poverty. I spent the rest of the day in my workshop, not working on a chair, but reviewing legal documents that would shift the power balance in Charleston. By the end of the week, Miller Trust would own the mortgage on Julian's family home. I felt a cold clarity, like ice forming on a lake. I had been financing my own humiliation for years, and it was time to close the Bank of Mom for good. It was time for a change. A week later, Charleston was buzzing with rumors about a massive corporate takeover. I dressed in a simple, elegant navy suit, no logos, just quality, and drove to the Battery. I parked my old truck 3 blocks away and walked to Isabel's grand estate. I wasn't there to beg for my daughter's return. I was there to inspect my new acquisition and see the face of the woman who thought I was an inferior peasant. I saw Julian and Samantha on the balcony, laughing with Isabel. They looked like a scene from a magazine, sipping drinks and looking down at the tourists. They didn't see me standing on the sidewalk. I looked at the peeling paint on the upper window frames. This house was beautiful, but it was rotting from the inside, much like the people inhabiting it. I made a note: repairs needed for character. Later that afternoon, Julian received a legal notice that changed the color of his face. As a high-end realtor, he had been trying to sell the Sterling estate for months to cover his mother's gambling debts. The notice informed him that the estate had been sold in a private sale to an anonymous trust. Not only that, but the trust had purchased the primary mortgage on Isabel's own home. They were tenants now. Samantha called me that night, her voice frantic but still laced with her usual ego. "Mom, did you hear? Someone is buying up the whole street. Julian is terrified. If the new owner decides to call in the debts, we're finished. You wouldn't happen to know about the Miller Trust, would you? I smiled into the phone, the smell of cedar wood filling the air. I'm just a poor carpenter, Sam. How would I know that? I hung up before she could respond with another insult. The trap was finally set. Samantha had wanted a life with winners, but she was about to learn that true winning isn't about the display of wealth, it's about the control of it. I went back to my workshop and started sanding a Queen Anne chair. The wood was old, weathered, and discarded, but beneath the grime was something priceless. Just like my own true self, I realized that the hardest part of the journey wasn't finding the deeds, it was believing my own worth. Richard had spent years making me feel like I was just a helper, and I had passed that humility down to a daughter who saw it as weakness. I want other women to know that their intuition is a gift, not a symptom of being difficult. If something feels wrong in your house, look in the drawers. The truth is worth finding. I never liked the way Julian looked at my daughter. It wasn't the look of a man in love. It was the look of a collector who had finally acquired a rare, fragile vase for his trophy case. In their grand colonial house, everything was too quiet. Like a museum where you weren't allowed to touch the art. I felt like an intruder in my own daughter's life, watching her move like a shadow in her own home. Within 48 hours, the news had spread through Charleston like a wildfire. The Carpenter Queen had unseated the city's oldest socialite. Samantha tried to come home, but I had changed the locks. Not out of malice, but because she needed to understand that a home isn't a revolving door for when your luck runs out. She stood on my porch, crying, the same suitcases now looking heavy. "Mom, please, Isabel kicked us out. She blames me for not knowing about your money." She sobbed through the wood. "Julian has left to stay with a friend, and I have nowhere to go. Please, just let me in." I opened the window just a crack to look at her. "You said you wanted a winner's life, Samantha. A winner knows how to build from nothing. Go find a job. Experience the smell you hated so much." Samantha spent 3 months working as a waitress in a diner 3 towns over. For the first time in her life, she had to scrub floors and deal with difficult people who saw her as invisible. She lived in a tiny studio apartment that actually did smell like old grease and struggle. I watched her from a distance, making sure she was safe, but I never stepped in. I was a master of restoration. You have to strip away the old, rotten varnish before you can reveal the beautiful grain underneath the surface. Julian tried to sue me for emotional distress, but my legal team laughed him out of the courtroom. He eventually disappeared to Atlanta to try his hand at a new scam. Isabel was forced into a modest retirement community, her gold jewelry sold to pay her creditors. The end was near. The grand mansion on the Battery was now filled with the sound of saws and hammers. My students began transforming it into a center for excellence in the historic arts. One evening, Samantha showed up at my workshop door. She wasn't wearing designer clothes or fake diamonds. She was wearing a simple uniform, and her hands were rough and calloused from work. She looked humble. She didn't have suitcases this time. She had a small, handmade wooden box she had built in a night class at the community college. "I made this, Mom," she said, her voice quiet and steady. "It's not perfect. The grain is a bit off and the lid sticks. But I worked 10 hours on it. Can I come in? Not as a winner, just as your daughter who failed." I looked at the box and then at her eyes. I let her in. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen she had mocked so cruelly, and we ate a simple vegetable stew. We didn't talk about millions, mansions, or revenge. We talked about the box she made. I showed her how to sand the edges so the lid would fit perfectly into the groove. "Value isn't what you buy, Sam," I said. "It's what you withstand. Character has its own scent." Samantha began apprenticing under me in the workshop. At first, she was clumsy, but she had my blood in her veins and a hidden talent for detail. She learned to appreciate the history of the pieces we worked on together. We spent a year in that workshop, rebuilding our relationship one joint at a time. I eventually revealed the full extent of the trust to her, not as a gift, but as a duty. "The money isn't for jewelry or status, Samantha," I told her as we stood on the balcony of the newly opened school. "It's for the people who work with their hands and are ignored by winners. We are the keepers of the past, so the future has a foundation to stand on." She looked out at the city, her city now, and I saw a woman I was finally proud of. The arrogance was gone. We received a letter from Isabel months later. She was struggling in the retirement home and asked for a favor, a way to be useful again. Samantha looked at me, then at the letter. "What should we do, Mom?" I handed her the pen. "You're the manager of the Sterling Foundation now. You decide its path." Samantha wrote back, offering Isabel a job as a docent at the new school. It wasn't charity. It was a chance for Isabel to earn her keep and find a new purpose in life. My workshop still smells of sawdust and wax. To some, it might still smell like poverty, but to us, it smells like a legacy. Samantha married a kind man who valued her for her skills. They had a small wedding in my backyard. There were no diamonds, just flowers. As the sun set on her wedding day, I realized that my greatest restoration wasn't a piece of furniture, it was my family. Years passed, and the name Rebecca Miller became synonymous with the rebirth of Charleston's soul. I was 75 when I officially retired, handing the keys of the main workshop to Samantha. She was a master now, her work sought after by museums across the entire country. She still lived in a modest house, though she could afford a palace. "The battery is too loud and pretentious, Mom," she joked while we worked. "I prefer the sound of the marsh and the smell of the wood." We turned our old house into a museum and a training ground for the next generation. Thousands of young women passed through our doors, learning that their hands were their greatest assets in life. We created a scholarship fund for single mothers, ensuring that no woman would ever have to choose between her dignity and her child's future. The Miller method became a national standard for historical preservation and social work. On a warm South Carolina evening, Samantha and I sat on the porch of the school, watching her young son, my grandson Leo, play with some simple wooden blocks on the floor. He was only 5, but he handled the wood with a strange, innate reverence that brought tears to my eyes. Samantha leaned over and whispered, "Does it smell like victory to you, Mom?" I laughed and shook my head. "No, Sam, it smells like home." I thought back to that day when she had slammed the door, leaving me for a life of winners. I wasn't angry at all anymore. That betrayal had been the catalyst for everything beautiful that followed. It had forced her to grow, and it had forced me to step out of the shadows and into the light. Sometimes you have to lose someone to help them find themselves. And sometimes the person who mocks you is the one who needs your strength the most. I closed my eyes, listening to the distant sound of a chisel hitting wood. Savannah's seasons change, from the humid summers to the mild winters. Every season brings new memories that layer over the old ones like varnish. The memory of the attic or the workshop is like an old scar. It's there, but it doesn't hurt anymore. I am Rebecca Miller, a grandmother, a teacher, and a survivor. The battery is full, my heart is open, and my house is finally full of light and truth. People in town still whisper when they see us, but the whispers have changed from pity to respect. They used to whisper about the tragedy of a woman left with nothing. Now they whisper about the miracle of the Miller Empire. I don't mind the talk anymore. Let them know that even in a city as old as Charleston, justice can still find its way through the cracks. We are a living reminder. I recently found a box of Samantha's old toys in the garage. I brought them to her, and we spent the afternoon cleaning them up for Leo. As we scrubbed the plastic and fixed the dolls, I realized that we were doing more than just cleaning old junk. We were preserving the childhood that pride almost stole from our family. Every laugh from Leo is a small victory over the man who wanted to divide us. Samantha has started a blog for women in controlling relationships. She writes under a pseudonym, but her words are powerful and raw. She gets hundreds of messages a day from women who are where she was years ago. She tells them about the museum and the vase. She tells them that the first step to freedom is realizing that you aren't an object to be owned by anyone. I've started taking art classes at the community center. I paint the marshes and the old oak trees with their hanging moss. My teacher says I have a keen eye for detail. I tell him it comes from years of looking for things that weren't supposed to be there. Painting allows me to process the colors of my life, the dark grays of the past and the vibrant greens of my new garden of truth. Julian's parents tried to contact us once, asking for forgiveness for their son's mistakes. They blamed his actions on the stress of his failing career. I didn't get angry or send a nasty reply. I just sent them a copy of the final audit. Some people aren't ready for the truth, even when it's staring them in the face. We are. We live in the truth every day. Samantha came home for the holidays last year and brought a friend from her restoration classes. They sat on the porch and talked until the stars came out over the marsh. I listened to their dreams and their plans for the future of the city. I looked at Samantha's face, illuminated by the porch light, and I saw a woman who was truly happy. She's no longer looking at the price tags of life. I decided to donate Richard's old library to the local school of architecture. I kept only a few books, the ones he had written notes in for me. I realized that keeping things just because can sometimes weigh your spirit down. I want to live a light life, surrounded only by what brings me joy. My cottage is small, but it feels much bigger than any mansion. It's a house of breath. The realtor who helped Julian hide the debts was eventually forced into retirement after an investigation. It wasn't directly because of our case, but our case was the crack in the dam. I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction seeing him leave his office for the last time. Justice in Charleston is a slow-moving river, but it eventually reaches the sea. Every stone we turned made us stronger. I am sitting in my garden today. The lilies are in full bloom, the air is sweet, and the bees are busy among the flowers. I feel a deep sense of gratitude for my life, even the hard parts, even the betrayal. Because without it, I wouldn't know the true strength of my daughter or the resilience of my own heart. We are a family forged in fire, and we are now unbreakable. My story is one of thousands in this old city. Every house has its drawers and its hidden envelopes, but I hope my story encourages others to keep their eyes open, to look for the lost treasures in their own lives, to listen to the soft pacing of their own instincts. Because the truth is always there, waiting to be found. And once you find it, you can never be a prisoner again. As the evening settles over the battery, I pick up my phone to call Samantha. The battery is at 100%. A small symbol of my own readiness. I am ready for whatever tomorrow brings to my door. I have my keys, I have my voice, and I have my family back. The mansions are just ghosts, but we are very much alive. We are the survivors of the silent war for dignity. The original ledger is now in the museum's Hidden Histories exhibit. Samantha decided to share it, with names changed, of course. She wanted people to see the reality of financial restoration. She spent hours helping the curators set up the display case. It's a powerful exhibit, a small brown book in glass, surrounded by the words of those who stood their ground. It's no longer a secret. I recently received a letter from a woman who saw the exhibit. She wrote, "I went home and looked in the attic. I found what I was afraid to find, but now I am finally free." I held that letter and cried. That is the real legacy of our restoration. It's not about the trial or the money. It's about the chain reaction of truth. One woman finds her worth, and others follow. Samantha and I went to a concert in the park last night. We sat on a blanket and listened to the music under the mossy oaks. For the first time, she didn't check her phone for status updates. She wasn't worried about being seen at the right table. She just enjoyed the music and the moonlight. I watched her and realized the vase wasn't just repaired. it was transformed into oak. Leo is starting school this year. He's nervous, but I told him he has the miller spirit in his bones. I gave him a small, polished stone to keep in his pocket, a truth stone. I told him that as long as he has that stone, he has to be honest with himself. He took it very seriously. I want him to grow up in a world where the truth is as natural as breathing. The attic is just a story. I've started a small business selling my marsh paintings for charity. I donate half the profits to a legal aid clinic for those who can't afford representation in family court. It feels good to turn my keen eye into something that helps others fight their own battles for justice. I'm not a famous artist, but my paintings are in houses all over Charleston. They are seeing a piece of my victory. I am 76 now. My hair is completely white and I wear it down sometimes, letting it catch the breeze from the Atlantic. I don't feel senile or poverty-stricken. I feel sharp and powerful. I feel like a woman who knows exactly where her strength is stored. I look at the mansions on the Battery whenever I drive by, and I don't feel a sting of pain or envy. I feel peace. Samantha is coming home for the summer. She's bringing a group of friends from the artisan school to help clear some trails in the local nature preserve. She's always working, always building, always moving forward into the light. She tells me she still writes in a diary, but now she writes about her dreams and her successes, not her fears. I am the proudest grandmother in South Carolina. I'm sitting on my porch, writing the final words of this story. The sun is setting, casting a golden glow over my workshop. The truth lilies are closing for the night, waiting for tomorrow's dawn. I feel a deep, profound peace in my soul. My name is Rebecca Miller, and I have told my truth. I have cleared the dust. I have opened the iron box and found our life. I'm going to put down my pen now, go inside my unlocked house, and enjoy a quiet evening with my daughter. To everyone listening, remember that your life is not a museum for others to judge. You are not an object to be displayed or controlled by anyone. You are the architect of your own soul. Don't be afraid of the silence, but don't let it become a cage that traps your spirit inside. Look in the drawers of your life. Find the hidden letters and the forgotten deeds. Speak the truth even if your voice shakes, because the light is always stronger than the attic of secrets. And love, real, honest love, never needs a lock to keep it safe. This is my story, and it is a story of a life truly restored from the ashes of betrayal and restored with the gold of the truth. I realized that the smell of poverty was just a mask for the scent of hard work and integrity. My daughter-in-law's insults were the final push I needed to stop hiding my strength. I had spent years being the ATM mom, and I didn't even realize I was bankrupting my own soul. But that night in the cold room changed me forever. I am no longer a source. I am a person with boundaries. True wealth isn't in the numbers in a bank account. It's in the ability to look at yourself in the mirror without shame. I found that wealth in the workshop, among the wood shavings and the tools. I found it in the eyes of my students as they realized their own power. And I found it in the quiet moments on the porch, watching the sun set over the marsh we saved. That is my true fortune. Richard would have been so angry about the gala, but he would have been even more proud of Samantha. He always wanted her to be a winner, but he didn't know that winning required losing everything first. We learned that the vase didn't need to be protected. It needed to be fired in the kill of reality. We are now stronger than we ever were when we were just a perfect family in a big house. My sister Arthurine called me yesterday, laughing about the Miller method going viral. "I'm glad your house smelled like failure to her," she joked. "The world is a better place because you got kicked out of that suite." I laughed with her, feeling the joy bubbling up. It's a good life when you can laugh at your own tragedies and see them for the lessons they truly were meant to be. I'm teaching a new class on the art of boundaries at the center next week. I tell my students that a no is just as beautiful as a perfectly carved dovetailed joint. It creates a structure that can actually hold weight. I want them to build lives that are as solid as the furniture we restore. I want them to be masters of their own destiny, just like I finally became at 73. The smell of cedar and wax is the scent of my freedom. It reminds me of the day I opened the iron box and decided to buy the battery. It reminds me that I am the landlord of my own heart now. Julian and Isabel are just footnotes in a much larger story of restoration. I am Rebecca Miller, and my house smells like victory, peace, and the honest, beautiful scent of a life lived well. My grandson Leo asked me if I ever regret being so hard on his mother. I told him the truth. Leo, being nice was letting her rot in a life of lies. Being hard was giving her the tools to find her own grain. He thought about it and then nodded, holding his truth stone tight. He's a smart kid. He sees the strength in the wood, not just the polish on top of it. He is my heart. Final thought for the evening. Don't wait for your house to smell like poverty to find your worth. Don't wait for the door to slam to realize you have the keys to the empire in your closet. Stand tall today. Speak your truth now, because you are a masterpiece in progress, and the restoration of your soul is the most important work you will ever do. Goodbye for now.